Back again, this time to talk about the books that I read in January. So January was another really busy month for me. I was not able to read as many physical books as I normally would have or wanted to. I was on the go a lot more, and I also had limited time to actually sit and read. So I only read 2 physical books, and the rest were Kindle and audio. So let's start with the physical. So one of the physical books I read was A Date with the Dinosaurs by Edward Packard, which I'll show you the cover here. So this is part of the Choose Your Own Adventure series, which was real popular when I was a kid. I absolutely loved the Choose Your Own Adventure books. I was super into them. I read all of the ones we had at the school library. I read all the ones they had at the public library. And I was always on the lookout for a Choose Your Own Adventure book that I hadn't read. And this one in particular was written by Edward Packard, who was also the creator of this series. Unfortunately, the Choose Your Own Adventure books that he wrote are no longer in print because there was something that happened when the rights to the series was purchased by what I believe is the current publisher. I don't think it's been sold again, but something didn't go smoothly there because Edward Packard essentially took his ball and went home. So any of the books he wrote, he retained the rights to, and he did not give the new publishers the rights to publish those. So you can only find his books used now, which of course means that anytime I'm in a used bookstore or I'm cruising around on eBay or something like that, I just make a quick check to see if I can find some Edward Packard books. And this is one that I found. It's an ex-library, obviously. I was actually able to remove several of the stickers without damaging the book. I was pretty impressed with myself on that. But anyways, this is one that I found used online. And I had a lot of fun reading it. I'll show you some of the illustrations here. Here's one. Here's one of a pterodactyl. I always think the illustrations are so cute in these Choose Your Own Adventure books. So yeah, so that was a lot of fun. The other physical book I read was for the New World SF book club. And that is Little Brother by Cory Doctorow. And I say I read this, but I'm using that term loosely. I didn't actually read it. This was a DNF for me, unfortunately. I think it's probably a good book. I can see how somebody would like it. However, it's YA, and as a general rule, I don't tend to like books in the YA category. They just don't appeal to me. There have been a handful of exceptions, but usually no, I usually don't enjoy them at all. The other thing is, this is not the kind of science fiction I like. In fact, to me, this is sort of on the fringes of science fiction. I like harder science fiction that has to do with, space or artificial intelligence, time travel, aliens, all of those standard science fiction themes. And this is a group of teenagers who essentially rebel against an unjust government using their computer hacking skills. And it's probably a near future setting, but there's none of the things I like about science fiction in this. I'm sure it's appealing to the right reader. Another book I read in January was Drunk on a Plane by Zane Mitchell. I read this on Kindle. Oh, actually, this one was one I went back and forth between the Kindle and the audiobook. So if you watched me on Mark and Shawn's live on Friday, we did I did the live Friday reads with them, and I talked about the books I had read this week, and one of the books I named was Drunk on a Plane. I didn't read Drunk on a Plane. I got confused. What I read this week was its sequel called Drunk on a Boat. So yeah, I misspoke by accident. So yeah, I read the first one in January. That was actually a reread for me. Drunk on a Boat is about a character named Daniel T. Drunk, who in book 1, he is boarding a plane when the book opens because he caught his fiancée sleeping with her ex-boyfriend in his apartment the night before their wedding. And of course, he's very upset by this, so he decides to take the honeymoon by himself, and he goes to a place called Paradise Island. And while he's there, he just gets checked in. He goes downstairs to get a drink at the bar and ends up meeting this old man named Al and talking to Al for hours at this bar and drinking. And when he goes back to his room, there are police surrounding his room because they have found a dead body inside. And the police are suspicious of him because they don't like Americans. And also it was in his room, and the whole situation just seems suspicious to them. So he spends the book trying to prove his innocence. And Daniel is a cop in the United States, but he's a uniformed officer. He's not a detective. And by his own claims, he's not a very good cop. So him and Al, who becomes a really close friend of his and is, 80 years old, they go around trying to solve this murder. And it was just really a lot of fun if you're just looking for something different and fun to read. However, that the series does come with a bit of a warning, or at least the first 3 books do. The character in the book just objectifies every woman he sees. Every woman he sees, he talks about her body, her looks, and how much he wants to sleep with her. But otherwise, it is a really, really good time, and I definitely recommend them. Another book I read on Kindle was Decaturs Wake by Daniel Wattenberg, which is a nonfiction that I read as part of the Great Pirate Project. So Decaturs Wake is about this naval officer named Stephen Decatur. Stephen Decatur was tasked by the American government to take a small fleet of naval ships to address a problem we were having with the Barbary pirate states. So back in the day, the Barbary pirates were like the terror of the seas. Everybody feared and hated the Barbary pirates. They would make governments pay them to not attack their ships. It was protection money, So the United States was a new country at the time. And these Barbary pirates, knowing that the United States was exceptionally weak to them, they would make us pay this exorbitant amount of money and then not attack our ships for a while, but then they'd start attacking us again and then raise the price and demand even more money from us. So the government decided, hey, we're going to get a real navy put together. We're going to send this Stephen Decatur over there to take care of this problem. And he did. He marched over there with a small fleet of ships and just put those Barbary pirates to task. And it was quite an interesting read. I really, really enjoyed that book. I just wish it had been longer and there had been more information about the circumstances and the people involved in it. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Another nonfiction book I read was Incest, A Journal of Love by Anaïs Nin. Anaïs Nin is a French writer who kept a diary her entire life and ended up publishing a number of her diaries. The one I read was the second in her diary series, and it was 1934 to 1935. She was 30 years old in the diary. And I did not care for it. And as a matter of fact, I developed a very strong dislike for this woman through her diaries. It stressed me out quite a bit. I felt quite a lot of stress and had to put it down a number of times. So this is a book that has a lot to it. I actually should do an individual video talking about all of my thoughts on just that book. It was disturbing, and there's quite a lot to say about it. Now, on the other end of the reading spectrum, I read a book I absolutely loved called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. And the narrator is a 15-year-old boy who is autistic, and he finds his next door neighbor's dog dead in her yard. Somebody has run it through with a garden tool of some kind. So he decides that he is going to solve the mystery of this dog's murder, and he's going to write a book about it. And that's what you're reading. And it was so good. And I expected this to be a lighthearted read, but it got very, very serious by the end of the book. It's just as you're reading, or as I was reading anyway, I was really enjoying it, and I was enjoying the narration and having the perspective of the autistic boy and the way his mind worked. But it just got, as the book went on, it got more and more and more serious, and that seriousness just crept in there. And before you knew it, it was just, I don't even want to say anything more about the seriousness of it because I don't want to spoil it in case you want to read it, which I do recommend. This is not the kind of book that I would normally read, but it was absolutely fantastic. I'm not sorry at all. Another book I read was book 7 in the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This one was called Deadbeat, and I did really like this one, and I gave it 4 stars like I have all of the previous Dresden Files. But then I immediately afterwards read book 8, which is called Proven Guilty, and this was the first one that I gave 5 stars. It was so good. It's really just so much better than all of the previous books. And I thought all of the previous books were good. But this one was fantastic. And in the main enemy that he's trying to deal with in this book are ghosts who are being summoned and given the form of monsters and slashers from horror movies. And it was so much fun and really well done. I thought this was better done than all the other books so far. So anyways, yeah, fabulous. Love the Dresden Files, by the way. If you have never read them, you absolutely should. Another book I read on Kindle was book 3 in the Gorian saga called Priest Kings of Gore. And those are by John Norman. So when I started Priest Kings, I didn't think I was going to like it. However, it fooled me. I absolutely loved it, and it's my favorite one so far. A lot of the sort of lore and world building that he sets up in book 1 and 2 come to fruition in this third one. Oh my goodness, it was fabulous, fantastic. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, was very pleased at the way that ended up going for me. But I can't say anything more about that third book without spoiling the first 2 books. But I would like to take a minute at some point and talk about the Gore books that I've read so far, because everybody calls them like trashy books and sort of snubs them. And they are kind of trashy books, but they're really well done. I think they're well written. I think the world building is fantastic. Clearly, this author has given so much thought into his world and the culture and the religion and the everything. Just everything is just so well thought out and well planned. And that's a hallmark of good fantasy, in my opinion. And then I read a number of short stories, the audio versions of short stories. So I didn't read them. I listened to a number of short stories in audio format. Oh, this one was actually physical. So one of the short stories I read was The Kit Bag by Algernon Blackwood. And it's actually from Christmas Gothic Short Stories, which I don't have the book here at hand because I forgot about that one. But I'll put the picture of the cover here. And I read that in physical form. That book was sent to me for Christmas by the bookish Bryants. And The Kit Bag is about a man who I can't remember now. He was either a judge or he was in the courtroom during this serial killer's trial. And he witnessed the man's beheading. And he's going to go on a trip and he borrows a bag from a friend. And let's just say the bag turned out to not belong to the friend. It was really a fun story. It was really cute. And it reminded me a lot of the M.R. James ghost stories. Then I read The Werewolf by Alma Katsu, which takes place during World War II. In a small village in Romania. And in this village is a group of men who can transform into werewolves. And it's so short I can't really say anything else about it without spoiling it. But I really did enjoy that. I thought it was a really good story. Another one I listened to was The Ark by Veronica Roth, which is a future Earth that is about to be hit by a comet. So people are boarding this giant colonizing ship called the Ark to leave Earth and to find another home. And we follow one particular woman who is a botanist who discovers a brand new species of orchid right before the Earth is about to be destroyed. And so I thought that was a good story. It didn't blow my mind or anything, but it was fine. It was good. Another one I read was The Future Library by Peng Shepherd. Also another really good book about a future in which the surface of the Earth has been eroded to the point that it is almost not livable. A lot of climate change has happened and humanity is essentially hanging by a balance. And this woman has set up sort of a tree refuge. And at the time she sets up the refuge, the trees are nearly gone. And then, of course, by the time the trees are grown, there are absolutely no trees whatsoever in the world. And the plan is to use a certain percentage of the trees to publish a book written by an author, and then preserve the rest of the trees for the conservations of the trees, of course. So something very interesting happens with these trees that I thought was something kind of new and different that I haven't read before myself. And it was a good story. Did it blow me away? No. 3 stars, but still perfectly good story, especially if you're just wanting something fast and on audio while you're doing housework or something, which is how I listen to them. And then I listened to a erotica short story called Sweek by Vera Valentine. So this is, of course, a sexy story in which the two men in the story are a type of golem who were brought to life from balloon animals. Or balloon people, I should say. They started out being balloon people, and this female magic user brought them to life and used them as sex slaves, and she was very abusive to them, and so they escaped and went out in the world together, where they met a woman, a college student who's in her early 20s, and things happened from there. And it was very funny. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really creative, actually. I thought the use of magic was creative in this story, and just the whole idea of golems from balloon people was hysterical. And she even wrote a sequel to it, which isn't out yet, but I did pre-order it, and I do plan to listen to that one as well. Another short story I listened to on audiobook was My Evil Mother by Margaret Atwood, which was about a girl. You follow this girl from the time she's a child into her adulthood. You follow the relationship between her and her mother. And her mother has told her entire life that she's a witch, and that all these different things happened because of the fact that she's a witch. And she built all of this sort of lore and mystique around herself as a witch. And the daughter never ever believes it her entire life. And then one day she does have a daughter herself. And I can't tell you anything more about that story without spoiling it. However, it was fine. It was a fine story, but I really didn't enjoy it that much. It's not really the sort of story that I generally go after, but I was looking for short stories. I really had not read Margaret Atwood, so I thought this would be a nice way to sample some of her writing. Another audiobook I listened to is Mutt In Time by Shawn, which is part of the Middle Falls Time Travel series. So that is a series of novels about people who live a life and then wake up in the past in their own bodies, only a younger version of themselves at some point in their life. But they do retain their memories, and they're just kind of born over and over again. And they don't know why. And I've only read the first book in that series, so I don't know if that's has been revealed yet in any of the books. But Mutt In Time is a short story, a short Christmas story about a dog who relives his life over and over. Or her life. It's a female dog, actually. And I loved it. I thought that was so great. And we follow her through there. It's like a series of 3 short stories, and it's 3 of her lives that she lives. And oh, it was so great. Super fantastic. Even if you've never read the series, you would have no trouble following the stories and this one. So I think that is it for all of the books I read in the month of January, and I will call that the end of the video.